This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Love and War, Part 6. When we left off, Melissa was holding her abductor hostage and ministering to him. And if you watched the bonus episode, Part 1 and 2, then you already know. Samuel had watched from his laptop as Big Dro made a move on Charlotte. He closed the laptop, pissed, just as the flight landed in North Carolina. And in Dallas, Texas, True was interrogating lead agent Nisha Rushing, Notorious Five Families style. She was as dirty as a pig in mud, and True was gonna get all the details. The Queen Mother had just dropped a bomb on the whole family. Pops Andy had a son that nobody knew about, except Uncle Nigel. The only head of the families who wasn't present was Emmanuel Manny Lopez. And if you know about him, then you already know that he was somewhere plotting and putting in work, because he always has a trick up his sleeve. He isn't just the head of the Lopez family. He's the head of the Notorious Five. And the relationship that he's established with Melissa is so solid that if one hair on her head is missing, when this is over, whoever's behind it and everybody connected to them is going to be on a t-shirt. For the past year and a half, True had been undergoing intense training to be the right-hand woman of Stephanie. In the meantime, she and Marley had been double-teaming the Queen Mother. She basically become Marley's protege. Marley was Samuel's right-hand man for 40 years, and he knew everything there was to know about the Baptiste family, the Notorious Five, and how to play that role. And since Stephanie was in position to replace Uncle Manny, True was also receiving intense training from Uncle Manny and his right-hand man, Javier. So while True was interrogating Agent Nisha Rushing, she had Javier in her ear, and he was listening to everything. He had very little to add because True was holding her own, but he was running down everything that Nisha was giving True. And while she thought she wasn't giving True much, she had no idea who she was dealing with, because she had no clue what Q's family was into. Meanwhile, Q was interviewing his oldest son, Michael, and he had a story to tell. Michael said, "So Pops, let me make sure I understand now. You said that we should tell you everything, and there'd be no retribution. If I tell you what I know, you gotta promise that you're not gonna turn around and freeze all my accounts. And I'm still gonna be able to go to the spring dance with Tamara." Q chuckled and said, "Boy, you something else. Did you do anything that you can't live with?" Michael said, "No, sir." Q said, "Good. Then you and I are good. Now drop it on me." Then Michael told Q some things that made it very clear that his children all got it honest. In September, the Light had held an alumni weekend with graduates from the school who had life things in common with the new children who'd recently arrived and those who'd established relationships with the existing students returned to the campus for fun and mentorship activities. They wanted the children to see how their gifts could be used on into adulthood, how they could use those gifts in their careers, and how those gifts could be used for more than just being pastors of churches and other traditional roles in religious organizations. Melissa was paired with a man and a woman, both of whom were highly intelligent. They'd graduated early from high school, obtained college degrees, were using their skills in programs that very few people even knew about. Law enforcement always had people with spiritual skills on their payroll, and what the secular world called psychic abilities. The Light classified and developed as spiritual gifts. Melissa, unlike the other children, had two mentors because the male counterpart of her mentor team was also on the spectrum. So to ensure she had a well-rounded mentor relationship, the Light had paired her with a neurodivergent and a neurotypical mentor. It was the male in the pair who'd shown Melissa the entrance to the secret passageway under the property. He said, "This is where I used to come when I needed to shut the world out, when I just needed to be alone, when overstimulation and too much socialization had my gifts screaming inside my head. I would need someplace that I could go that other people wouldn't come." Now, he hadn't shown her the underground passage unprompted. Melissa and Michael had done their research on the light. They'd obtained a copy of the architectural plans and the survey plans for the property. And while the light had been in existence for over 100 years, it had an even more extensive history. If you know anything about the Catholic Church, then you know that there was a period of time around the world when Catholicism was under attack, and the leaders of the religious organization started building what they called priestholes in basilicas, houses, and other buildings to provide a way of escape or a place for priests to hide to evade Protestant persecution. Well, the grounds where the light currently stood was once owned by the Catholic Church, and the pool house was the priest's rectory. The light was still holding church service in the former basilica, and since they never gutted the pool house, they just renovated the inside. The priest holes that had been constructed hundreds of years before were still there. While they weren't listed on the floor plans or the survey plans, Melissa was a history buff, so she knew all about priest holes, and she tried everything to see if she could identify some on the property. But the chapel was locked when it wasn't in use, and she absolutely could not explore when it was. And she would have never guessed that the rectory turned pool house hadn't been demolished and rebuilt. So when she found out that her mentor was also on the spectrum, she figured he would be the perfect person to ask about any special places that he would go to have alone time. And she was right. Michael said, so he only told her about the one that was under the pool house. But when she came home from winter break, she told me that there was a second one, and she hadn't explored that one yet. Q asked, do you still have all of those floor plans? Michael said, yeah, on my computer. And Q said, and what else? She has a friend at school. His name is Luke. Well, Luther, but they call him Luke. She said she was going to enlist his help with finding the other passageway, and they were gonna explore it together. Q said, by explore, do you mean? Michael said, nah, she not doing that. She just really meant explore the passageway. Q said, boy. Michael said, I'm serious, Pops. She not trying to do nothing to ruin her quinceañera. Like a sweet 16, quinceañeras have their history in patriarchy. They're a coming-of-age celebration for young girls. They're intended to signify the transition from childhood to adulthood. But there is a huge emphasis on the young woman still being sweet. Young women who've been deflowered forfeit their right to a quinceañera, at least traditionally. And in an effort to help keep Melissa sweet, Manny had promised her the biggest quinceañera Dallas, Texas had ever seen, with that as the main condition, that she was still sweet. This was the first Q had heard of Melissa having a little friend. He said, so what you know about this Luke nigga? Michael said, he's a dweeb. When I say geeked out, he geeked out, Pops. The dude's super religious and corny as he real corny. You know that song y'all like? Whatever I say, y'all gotta do. Q was like, yeah, son. Michael was like, that's how she got him, Pops. Whatever she say, he do. When they were wrapping up the interview, Q said to Michael, now are you sure that you've told me everything? I can't have you holding nothing back, son. Michael said, Pops, Melissa's not just my sister, she's my best friend. I wouldn't hold anything back, even if I was gonna be in trouble. You know who you need to talk to, though? L3. She talked to him more than she talked to me. And I know he gotta know more about her friendship with Luke and about that secret passageway. Q said, thank you, son. Then he told him where to upload all of the floor plans and other information that he'd gathered about the light and about Luke. Because Michael had done a background check on Luke's whole family. I told you, them kids got it honest. Then Q sent a text to Big Wood, letting him know to check the file. Meanwhile, in North Carolina, Samuel has arrived, and he got a one-track mind. He done set the situation with Charlotte and Big Dro to the side, and he's running down the lead that the Queen Mother gave him about the necklace. He's tracing all of the steps that the hitman took once he had possession of that necklace. Unfortunately, though, he was unable to go onto the school grounds, and it was clear that that hitman spent a long time traversing the property. So he had to have been looking for someone or something. The Queen Mother had already let Samuel know that Big Wood and Donovan were on their way to North Carolina. So when he called her and let her know that he couldn't get on the property because the feds were all over the place, she told Q, and Q told her to have Samuel upload the route to the firm's server and put it in the same file where Michael would be uploading the information that he'd obtained. Then Q sent True a text asking her if she had any reason to believe that Supervisor Fred Acevedo was involved in whatever it was that Agent Nisha Rushing had going on. And True responded that Fred was clearly unaware. Q called Fred. He said, "I'm sure you're aware by now that Nisha is out." Fred said, "Yeah, she called me and told me that your wife doesn't trust her and that you have LJ helping you with the interviews. And I don't have an issue with that. But can you tell me why exactly your wife doesn't trust her?" Q said, "It's a long story, but I trust my wife's intuition. I told you when I started with the agency that I don't do female partners, but you insisted. You give the devil an inch, he takes 1,747 miles. So I try not to give him an inch." Fred said, "Well, don't worry. When this is over, we'll get you a new partner. Now, do you have anything that we can run down?" Q said, "Oh, I've got a lot, but I'm not sharing it with you. What I need is a little more latitude, and I'm not willing to accept no for an answer. I've got 2 men on their way there, and when they get there, they need carte blanche of the property. When I hang up with you, I'll be calling the administrators of the light and letting them know the same thing." Fred said, "And I'm not going to give you no pushback. I already told you. At this point, this is a matter of national security." Q said, "And I need to understand why you keep saying that. What does my 14-year-old daughter have to do with national security, Fred?" Fred said, "Your daughter has a mentor at the light, and that mentor works for the HSA, the Homeland Security Agency, and he is the son of the vice president. He called his mother this morning, before your daughter's abduction even hit the wire, and told his mother to give you whatever you wanted." Q was flabbergasted. He also told his mother to hire you. "So I have a vested interest in ensuring that you get everything that you want, so I don't piss off the vice president, and so I don't lose you to the HSA." Q said, "Anything that you have assigned to Agent Rushing that's associated with my daughter's case, you need to reassign it immediately. As a matter of fact, you need to handle it yourself. Out of respect, I am letting you know that she is no longer on this case, but she's not coming back in." Fred said, "What the hell is going on, St. James?" Q said, "She's dirty, and she's involved in my daughter's abduction, and I'm not cutting her loose until my daughter is found and I know everything she knows. If that's a problem, let me know now." Fred said, "St. James, I can't authorize you to do anything that's going to..." Q said, "I quit. My family and I are no longer cooperating with this investigation. We'll handle it ourselves." Fred said, "Oh, hell no. Now you've gone too far. I'm simply saying that I cannot give you permission to harm or torture a federal agent. I have children of my own. Not this agency, the vice president, or anybody else in the world would keep me from doing whatever I'd have to do to get my child back. So I'm not telling you not to do what you feel like you need to do. I'm simply telling you not to tell me about it." Q said, 10-4. When Q went to go and get L3 so that he could interview him, he had Regina to explain to him again the importance of telling him everything and not holding anything back. When L3 said that he understood, they started heading to the interview room. But then L3 said, "Wait a minute. With all due respect, I don't want to be interviewed with Agent Rushing or my dad in the room." Q and Regina just looked at each other because they didn't know what that was about, but they said, "Okay." And Regina said, "Do you want me to be there, son?" And L3 said, "That's fine." Since he was only 10 years old, Q thought it was best to have his mother in the room, so he said okay. Inside the room, L3 told them that Melissa had found the second passageway. It started where the basilica used to be and the chapel currently was. The entrance was behind the pulpit. About halfway to the exit, the 2 passageways met, and the exit itself was about 1/10 of a mile from Melissa's dormitory. He also told Q that Melissa and Luke had been gathering supplies and storing them in the passageway. And when he asked her why, she said, "One day I'm going to have to hide, and I don't know how long I'm going to be underground." Q immediately stopped the interview and ran out of the room so that he could call Big Wood. While he was gone, Regina asked L3, "Son, why didn't you want to be interviewed with your father in the room?" And L3 said, "Mom, promise me you won't be mad." Regina said, "Boy, I can't promise you that. Just tell me the truth." And L3 said, Well, remember that day that we went to go see Daddy at his office? Meanwhile, Q was on the phone telling Big Wood everything that he'd gathered from the children so far. They were both looking at the files that had been uploaded to the firm's server, and Big Wood, Donovan, and Q was solidifying a plan that would help Donovan and Wood access the underground passageways without alerting anybody else to the fact that they were even there. When all of a sudden, Regina came flying out of the interview room. She ran up on LJ and punched him square in his face, while yelling and cussing and calling him all kind of dirty bastards. When one of the guards came to try to grab her, LJ said, "Don't touch my wife." Before she could hit her husband again, Q grabbed her around the waist and said, "What's to you, Gigi?" Regina said, "Where the hell is your partner?" Everybody in the great room made their way to the hallway because they wanted to see the show. And when Angela heard Regina say, "My son saw you and that broad lip-locked, and the same thing I just gave you, I'ma give her," Angela said, "Oh, she in the office, the one connected to the master bedroom." And then Regina snatched away from Q, and she, Angela, Stephanie, Salima, and the Queen Mother made a beeline for the office. And since the door was already off the hinges, Regina ran up in the room and said, "You funky, foul, federal flagrant freak." And then she commenced to beating the snot out of a handcuffed Agent Nisha Rushing.